Hello everybody, welcome to my third YouTube video. I'm sorry for the delay. I've been a bit sick and I didn't want to sit here coughing in your faces. So to get us started, where was last time? I told you that I want to do an Nginx configuration for Jenkins. So I've updated the file in my spare time and I'm going to now take you through some of the changes that I've made. So one of the first things that I did when I started installing some of the stuff is I ended up getting warnings from Ubuntu about the versions of files between the original sort of Ubuntu version of the file and then the package maintainer's version of the file. So what I ended up having to do is I ended up having to put this in here to ensure that I don't get any problems for which version of the file Ubuntu must keep. So I honestly have actually no idea what either of those two things does. I know it solves my problem. So next step, as last time, just Jenkins. I haven't changed anything there. Certbot is one of the things I've changed. So what Certbot is it allows you to get free SSL certificates. Also, the cool thing about Certbot, and also you don't have to update the certificates. So for somebody that's had to install SSL certificates from Thought, is that you probably know by about in a year, is that you have to go back to Thought and you have to get updated certificates and you have to reinstall them because they only validate them for about a year, whereas this thing keeps validating in the background. So one of the other things under security that we've done, we've removed port 8080 because we're just not going to use it anymore because we're going to use Nginx as a proxy for Jenkins. Okay, next thing is this DigitalOcean. What this does, this installs DigitalOcean agent monitoring onto your box. So by default, DigitalOcean will tell you about CPU usage, it will tell you about disk usage, and it will tell you about I/O usage. But it won't tell you about memory usages, and it won't tell you what processes are running on your machine, which this can actually do. So when you install this, DigitalOcean can start giving you metrics on the memory usage on your box, and it can give you the processes that's running on the box. And lastly, what we did over here is that we also just concatenated or outputting the contents of this file. So when Jenkins installs itself, it has an initial admin password that it saves in this file. So what we're trying to do is with this is we're just trying to print it out onto the screen. So next step that I've got here, I've got the Nginx configuration. So what the Nginx configuration is, this is just sort of a standard proxy setup for Jenkins so that Nginx can accept a HTTP request and then forward it to Jenkins, take the response from Jenkins and then give it back to the end user. So you'll see what we've got here. We've got the server name, we've got some proxy set headers, and we've got proxy pass and proxy redirect. So what proxy pass does, this just tells Nginx where to send that HTTP request to. Proxy pass is just to clean some stuff up on the way back. And these things, they add HTTP headers to Jenkins. So what happens is that Nginx receives a request, it adds these headers, and then only sends them to Jenkins. So Jenkins gets to use some of these things for his own internal stuff. What we have then at the end here is that we just restart Nginx. So we do that just to make sure that this Jenkins configuration that we've set up here takes effect. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to and we're just going to set up the server now. So we're going to run that. We're going to wait for DigitalOcean to spin up this drive and then for Terraform to run all of these commands. Okay, so at the end of this file, on another note, is you'll see what I did here is that I ran this thing, or I put a little commented block down here. So this is a command that you run later. So how the certbot is that when you set it up, it actually tries to get to this domain that you give it. But the problem is that we haven't registered any DNS for this domain because we need an IP address, and to get an IP address we need to finish this whole process. So the idea is that you finish this whole process, register your DNS, and then you run this command manually later on. And this email address is just sort of your own email address that you're using for this box. So if it's work purposes, you'll probably be using a work email. If it's a private box, and you'll probably just use your own private email. The domains, this is the domain that you're trying to get the certificate for. This Nginx part, what this does, this tells certbot to take this default Nginx configuration and update it on the server. So it's not going to save it in this file. It's going to save it on this copy of this file that's living on the server. And those changes will include things like where the SSL certificates are. They'll have a redirect. So if you're trying to get to the site via HTTP, it will redirect you to HTTPS. And then non-interactive, agree TOS. So there's a terms of the conditions that you have to agree to. So if you're running it like this, I'll probably recommend that you go read it online. But all of this stuff does, this just tries to make sure that when we run this thing is that we're not getting prompted by certbot for any sort of additional output. Because my original thought was to run this as part of the installation process until I hit that little thing where it says that it tries to validate the domain, which doesn't yet exist or is not pointing to the server. So let's have a look at how this thing is doing. Okay, so it's busy installing. Let's see. Okay, so I think this is now gonna get to so I think this is now actually at the Jenkins process. Okay, so that's busy installing Jenkins. So we're currently around here, I think. So then we just have system start Jenkins, which starts it up. We have the certbot installation to install certbot onto the box. Then the security, and then maybe I should just comment this in. So let's see. What else is there to chat about? Okay, so let's talk I think a bit more about this provision part because I've kind of glossed over it. So what this does is that this copies a file. This copies this Nginx file. This copies this Nginx file to this file over here. So when you install Nginx on an Ubuntu server, it creates this file by default as part of the installation, which is just called default. So this default is a configuration to just print out a piece of HTML text that says something like Nginx or hello world or something like that. It's not something any sort of useful for us. And what we want to do is that obviously this is a very purposeful box, so this is for Jenkins, so we don't need to clutter it with like a special Jenkins configuration. Is that we're just going to use the default one, right? And what this does is installs this Nginx config. It takes this configuration and installs it there. So what it's actually doing is just sort of taking the default Nginx site configuration, not the whole Nginx configuration, just for the site, and it's overriding that with this contents. Right, so that the only thing that's really running on that box is Jenkins. So Jenkins is now finished running, and we've got an IP address. So the idea is that if we now browse to this IP address, is that we should be able to see Jenkins. And we're now opening up Chrome. Let's see what we get. Okay, awesome. it's showing there. So for interest sake, if you want to know what the password is this. So if you take that password and we put it in here, and notice like last time we were running off port 8080, but this time there's no port there, which means it's running on port 80, which is exactly what we want. So this is now running via, okay, we're not going to save that. So this is now running via Jenkins, which is exactly what we had. But there's actually still a few things I want to do to this Jenkins server before I actually fully commission it and say that I'm not done. I think one of the things that I still want to do with just Jenkins is set up a Docker server next on this box. So with that, I'll leave you. If you like this video, please like it. If you don't like it, please don't dislike it. YouTube are quite rough on those. Other than that, if you're interested in the next video, please subscribe. And cheers, guys. Bye-bye.